These set of notes are the Stone Age, so we're beginning here with these today. You'll see there's a link there to a short video clips, about 5 minutes, on Neolithic Ireland. Neolithic being the period during the Stone Age that we're making reference to here. The Stone Age is a period of art history that comes up on the exam paper almost every second year. It's very common. And they'll ask you, predominantly they'll ask you about the monuments created by these Stone Age people, because really that'll be the Dolmen, the Court Cairn, or perhaps a passage tomb. But they will also, in any question I've ever seen, they ask you a little bit to tell you what you know about the period itself, and also what we believe we know about the people who created these monuments. So that's why that little video is very good. It gives a general introduction to the Neolithic Stone Age. And so are the notes here are more general about the Stone Age and about human beings and the people of the time and their beliefs. So we'll just read down through them. Human settlement began in Ireland around 7000 BC during the Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age, because we have an early Stone Age, a Middle Stone Age, and the Late Stone Age. So the Mesolithic is when settlement began in Ireland. The earliest people were hunter-gatherers. They probably crossed by boat from Britain at a spot where the Irish Sea was narrow enough to enable them to see the coast of Ireland in the distance. And we know that back then Ireland and England were about 24 kilometres apart over sea. The forests and rivers of Ireland would have made rich hunting grounds for these people, who would have moved with the seasons to where food was most plentiful. Then after the Mesolithic came the Neolithic, or the New Stone Age, and this is where the monuments that we still see today were created. During the Neolithic or New Stone Age, 3700 to 2000 BC, farming and animal rearing people settled in Ireland, so we call them the first farmers. They cleared the forests, they planted crops, fencing off areas to protect these crops. There's evidence of permanent communities all over Ireland and contacts between Britain and Europe and the people in Ireland. We know they traded. These were the people who built the megalithic structures that we can still see today. Stone Age structures. The work of art and construction that survives from the Stone Age are generally associated with what we believe were ritual sites and places of importance to these first Irish people. Little evidence of their everyday lives or language survives, but we find remains of their tombs they built to revere and honour their dead. These early farmers brought seeds for crops and domestic animals to Ireland and have developed skills beyond the simple hunting and gathering society that first lived here. They had enough spare time to think out, plan and build large structures which do still dominate the local landscape. This megalithic people, from the Greek word mega meaning large and lithos meaning stone, used large stones to build their tombs, and we're going to see that in all of the three tombs we're going to look at. So the technology, the techniques they use. Wood and stone were the only materials available for building and making tools and weapons during the Stone Age. Some hard stones could be broken and shaped to produce sharp edges that then were used as knives, scrapers, chisels, axes, spearheads and arrowheads. Experiment with Stone Age tools has shown us that they were surprisingly effective, these tools, in spite of their crude appearance. An arrowhead, so a stone arrowhead, embedded in part of a human pelvis, was found during the excavations at Polnabrún Dolmen in County Clare, demonstrating the power of a Stone Age bow and the sharpness of a stone arrowhead. Axes were used for chopping down trees and wood and were made by tying wooden handles onto a carefully shaped polished stone axe head. Wood was used to make tools for digging and ploughing, and some vessels were made of wood. Clay was dug up and built into a variety of simple pots which were probably fired on an open fire. Domestic buildings were generally round in plan and probably made from stone, wood, and mud with thatched roofs. Stones for large structures would have been moved by dragging and levering and possibly using logs as rollers to ease the progress of the largest stones. What's important to remember here, on these large megaliths that we're going to look at, were moved by people, by manpower. There was no beasts of burden at that time, and the wheel was not available yet in Ireland. This page has some terms that I just want to make sure that we've explained them properly, that you'd use in an exam question answer on the Stone Age. So the Mesolithic period was the second period in the Stone Age. It's called the Middle Period. The Mesolithic means middle. The first human settlers came to Ireland during this time, around 7000 BC, and this was known as the Middle Stone Age or the Mesolithic period. They were hunters and depended totally on hunting. They were a nomadic people who would create temporary settlements near rivers in order for them to catch fish and to hunt and for water. They would then move on somewhere else. So they were constantly moving. We have no evidence that they built any of these large structures that we're going to look at. Next thing, what happens is the Neolithic comes along. This is the next period, the New Stone Age as we call it. This was the Neolithic period that followed the Mesolithic period, and a time when many changes began to take place. One of the first changes was the development of food producing methods like harvesting of crops and breeding animals. Second, the landscape of Ireland changed greatly too. There were less forests and land was divided into fields and communities where people lived. As we've said earlier, the people of the Neolithic period were farmers. They settled, they stayed in the same area, they cleared the land, they grew crops, and they had then, because they stayed in the same place, they had the time to start building these large architectural structures called megaliths. The megaliths meaning large and lithos meaning stone. These Neolithic people made amazing, huge stone burial monuments. They were resting places for their dead, but also stood as symbols of power. There are three types of megalithic tombs that we know of. One, a portal dolmen. Two, a court cairn. And three, a passage grave or a passage tomb. Portal dolmens. Well, there are portal dolmens all over Ireland. The one that we're going to look at is in Pullnabrune on the Burren in County Clare. And the link there that's in red, if you follow that, it brings you to it gives you a virtual tour. You can actually, manipulate it so you can see all different sides of the dolmen, so it's worth taking a look at that if you haven't been there before. The portal dolmen is the simplest of the megalithic structures that we know. We presume it was a burial tomb, as human remains and stone artifacts were found within. Typically it's constructed between 2 and 7 large stone uprights which support one large capstone on top. There are over 170 known portal dolmens in Ireland, but a particularly good example, as I've said, is at Pullnabrune in the Burren in County Clare. Pullnabrune dolmen is a portal tomb. The large capstone rises up from the limestone bedrock of the Burren, supported by 2 portal stones, each 1.8 metres high, holding up the front of the immense 3.6 by 2.1 capstone on an angle sloping down to the rear. A shallow cairn helped to brace the structure. There is a broken sill stone at the entrance which may have once served to close off the inner chamber. The site was excavated in 1986 and produced the remains of 16 adults and children plus other artefacts. These dated the tomb to around 3600 BC. The dolmen stands on a low circular cairn mound of stones about 30 feet in diameter. Log rolling. Log rolling was the technique that Stone Age man used, we believe, to move these enormous large megalithic stones. Trees were cut down, logs were laid on the ground in a row, and the large stone was pushed and pulled across these logs. They kind of acted like a rollers. So the stone moved along very gradually. When it would be pulled to the end of the row of logs, the logs would be taken and put in front again. And so gradually, very slowly, the large megalithic structures were pulled and rolled along the ground to their destination. This slide demonstrates what is believed to be, the manner, the technique which was used to construct a dolmen. So you can see there the top picture A shows Stone Age man transporting and log rolling the large megalithic stones which were used to build these dolmens. And B then shows them dragging this, and it shows them how they would have moved this across the distance, these large stones, to the site where they wanted to build the dolmen. You can see then on C, they would have dug a large hole, which would have been like a socket to hold the base of this huge megalithic structure. They built a soil ramp, which you can see there with the logs on it. The stone would have been pulled up this ramp and dropped down into the socket, as you can see in image D there. And again, this would have been repeated for all the uprights, depending on how many there were. So there then come down here to F, I should say, is it F? Yeah. So they had the uprights in place for the dolmen, the uprights being the side stone. So the next thing that had to be put on it was the capstone. The cavity and surrounding these uprights was filled with a soil mound. So you can see them there, they're filling it here. Then the large capstone would have been dragged up this mound and placed, log rolled and dragged up this mound and placed on top of the uprights and put into position. Then down here, the very last picture, you can see the soil and the supporting ramp and everything else was removed when all the when the capstone was in place. And that's how the construction technique for a dolmen. Court cairns are the second type of burial tomb we're going to look at, known as a court cairn or court tomb, and they are found almost exclusively in Ulster and in northern Connacht, and properly represent the oldest Neolithic constructions we know. They are found mainly in upland areas, and court cairns are rectangular burial chambers, roughly rectangular. They are distinguished by their roofless and oval forecourt at the entrance. Large slabs of rock were used to make the walls and roof of the very basic burial chamber, normally located at one end of the cairn, which, although blocked after use, could be immediately accessed from outside the courtyard. They are called gallery graves rather than passage graves, since they lack any significant passage. Now, when we go on to talk about Newgrange, it's a passage grave because there's a passage. These are called gallery graves. The example we use to describe here is Creevy Keel Court Cairn. It's one of the best examples of a court cairn in Ireland. It consists of a long trapeze-shaped cairn enclosing an oval court and a burial chamber of two narrow stone-lined passages 5 metres in length. The remains of 3 single chamber tombs are present in the western end of the monument. The cairn measures 55 metres in length and 25 metres wide at the eastern end, where the entrance to the court is located. Court tombs would have consisted of a segmented stone chamber covered by an earthen mound with an entrance courtyard that almost invariably faces east. Today the earthen mound is usually gone, leaving the internal stones of the tomb exposed. While the term tomb is used, it may be said there is evidence that these structures may possibly have served as temples or sites of ritual rather than simply tombs, and may have been used very frequently. The excavation of Creevy Keel in 1935 uncovered 4 cremation burials, some decorated and undecorated Neolithic pottery, flint arrowheads, polished stone axes, and other artifacts, including a chalk ball. There is quite a good sketch here of a court cairn, which would be what you would produce in the exam. And further down here at the bottom, there, if you follow the highlighted red link there to Voices from the Dawn, it takes you on a virtual tour of Creevy Keel Court Cairn, which is very informative.